Chapter 22 The New Millennium. When the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve, all the computers will stop working. Sometime after midnight, I welcomed the new millennium, drunk and high, and asleep, hugging the toilet bowl in a crappy, overpriced, 2-star motel in a floor-length shimmery dress. So much for glamour. I don't know if you heard, but leading up to New Year's Eve in the last months of 1999, there was a lot of buzz about the Y2K bug. You can look it up, but in the most facile, most basic of explanations, everyone was freaked that computers wouldn't be able to compute this new date, and a lot of people were freaked that all the computers would no longer work. So there was a whole, holy shit! What's going to happen when that clock hits midnight vibe, even as we all danced our way forward to the beat of all the super popular, super fun pop beats of the late 90s Latin invasion. God, I love that music, by the way. I mean, the night had started out fun. Hubs and I and a few friends had bought tickets for a New Year's Eve fancy dinner dance with drinks included at a local conference resort. The year before, we'd actually gone with my parents and an aunt and uncle of mine. I know, it sounds nuts to be in your 20s and partying it up on New Year's Eve with your parents, but we had so much fun. My parents were good to hoop it up with, and Mom and I both loved dancing, so we were out there on that floor. Anyway, I suppose I wanted to relive that magic, so we tried it out with friends. You can never really recreate these moments, though, and this time I got way too drunk, and this time we weren't able to get a nice room for the night in the resort itself, but instead at a somewhat sleazier place just down the road. Anything good was booked solid for that night. I mean, party like it's 1999 and all that jazz. We had a jacuzzi room, but nothing spicy was going to go down in that mildew motel that night. Hubs took one look at the dead flies in the big tub and vetoed that. Still, we most of all wanted to have fun and not worry about driving home after, so it would be better than driving back to my family home or trying to find a cab. I had a very fun dress. It was a glamorous, form-fitting, spaghetti strap, floor-length, dark green that almost looked black, with tiny beading that caught and shimmered the light. I didn't completely feel like I had the bod required for it, but fuck it. I was picturing some old Hollywood-style glamour. I don't recommend drinking a lot of booze and then smoking up. Should have been smarter like Hubs and just stuck to cocktails. Wisdom sometimes arrives way too late. The next morning, neither Hubs nor I were feeling too spectacular. We headed off in search of breakfast. I was already feeling pretty pale, and when I took one look at Hub's unstructured rustic sausage, which was made without the casing apparently, I almost hurled again. Hubs was in better shape than I was, but still not feeling his best. He turned a little green at that sausage himself. We spent a very lethargic day on the couch upstairs at my house watching TV, and eventually Hubs had to drive back home to where he lived with his family about an hour away. We'd reached a point where we were weary of being apart. Well, I hope it was both of us at least. So we made a deal. Whichever one of us got a good job first that could support both of us for a while would give us the green light to get a house together and determine where we'd live. Hubs had been working in shipping and receiving in a prominent department store at that time, and I was completely sick of and desperate to leave my job. Then Hubs got a job at head office in downtown Toronto. He was going to be one of those corporate office guys. The pay was pretty good. I had money saved up that would help pay for a home and help support us until I was able to find a new job. It was happening. We were going to move in together. I'd be moving to suburban hell. We started looking for a place together when we got the chance. It wasn't too long before we found a freehold, semi-detached town home. These were all very exciting terms in suburbia. It meant we wouldn't have to pay condo fees, and it meant we'd get as close to the proper house we envisioned and be able to afford it because if you wanted a fully detached house there, first, good luck finding one, and second, good luck affording one. I wasn't used to being packed into a neighborhood growing up, but that wasn't too big of a deal. We submitted our offer and it was accepted. We were going to be the proud new owners of our cute little 1,100 square feet townhome. Man, I still think that house is cute when I think about it. We were attached fully to our neighbors on the left and attached by our garages to our neighbors on the right. It would be mere weeks until we took possession of our new house. I was excited, but scared. My family was fairly horrified, but somehow I had developed some bizarrely steely determination to move forward in my life like an actual adult. I mean, hell, I was almost 28. It was time. At nighttime, though, it didn't sound so exciting. I'd be driving through the streets of my city, all quiet, covered in snow, Christmas lights twinkling in the cold, and feeling such a pang of sadness. This was my city. This was my home. How could I be leaving? I took Mom to see the new house one night. We had a really nice time until it was time to leave. Right before we headed back down the highway, we got a couple of coffees. Coffee loves cigarettes, and Mom tried to coax me into letting her have one. I'd become super militantly against smoking by this point in my life, and it was my car. There was no way in hell I was going to let anyone taint my cute little green car with the toxic reek of cigs. My car was one of the very few smoke-free zones in my life. I was rigid, and Mom got pissed. We didn't have the nicest drive back after that. By the time Hubs and I had bought a place, some of my favorite friends had already left the casino. I was so glad I was going to be leaving that job behind. In fact, I was jubilant. My boss was very nice and said if I ever needed a job there again, they'd be glad to have me back. I appreciated that, but in my mind, I was like, thanks, but hell no. 20 years later, I still have recurring dreams that I have to work there again. Listen, I know it sounds like a lot of whining, but the customers there nearly killed me. I packed up my clothes and my knickknacks, my Barbie doll collection, assorted sundry, my pillow, and my teddy bear, and that day came when it was time for me to drive off to my new house, my new life. Mom cried when I left, I was told. She didn't cry in front of me, and actually, for many, many years, Mom crying was a rare sight indeed. The older I got, the better we were getting along. God, it was sad. But I had a plan. I was going to live there in the new city for 5 years. I was going to live there for 5 years, make enough money, and move back home. Not to my childhood home, but the home that I so strongly felt was my town back in those days. That first night in suburban hell, trying to sleep on the stiff new mattress we'd got in that strange new room with the new bedroom set we'd bought from Sears, in our unfamiliar new home, with the crazy color scheme and wallpaper of the last owners, was a bit traumatic. Oh man, did I ever wish to be back in my sagging little single bed, in my little cubby corner of my room with my sister asleep less than 10 feet away from me. Suck it up, Karen, old kid old sock. Lord knows all you did for the past 8 years was pine and whine and yearn and long to be with your boyfriend 24/7. I was a bit freaked. It wasn't too long after we'd moved in that I needed a new cat. My beloved kitty had died just a few years before. She'd had all kinds of health problems and a tumor on her tongue, and finally had to go for that awful last ride to the vets. Dad had taken me, and I'd driven there with my poor girl on my lap. I put her up on that table. The vet had given me a very kind, very sympathetic look, and I'd walked out of there howling out involuntary sobs. It was weird, because somewhere in my brain I was thinking, are those noises coming from me? Holy shit! They are coming from me! And there I was, in an unfamiliar new city, alone every day because Hubs, of course, had a job, and I was going to get me a cat. I saw a post in a local paper from a shelter in town that was going to have a cat adoption day. The cats would be free to a good home, but I would have to pay for the necessary shots. This sounds stupid, but I can't remember exactly how I found directions back in those days. Did it involve looking it up online and writing directions down? I guess that's what I did. At any rate, My new cat was waiting for me all the way on the other side of town. I got a cardboard box ready with a soft little blanket in the bottom and headed east. As I recall, all of the cats there liked me except the little black cat, who was pretty unfriendly and not interested in being my new pet. That was the girl for me! She was just bigger than kitten stage, with a sleek little black body and stilty little long legs. I took her to the car and gently put her in the box. As I drove home, I had to do my best to hold the cardboard lid flaps over as my new pet furiously tried to emancipate herself, yowling loudly. I didn't want her scrawling around the car in terror, though, as I drove. What if she got hurt? I got her home and she clawed her way away from me, dashed off, and promptly disappeared in the stacked labyrinth of our unpacked boxes in the living room. I tried to find her for what felt like ages, calling her, trying to lure her out with food, but to no avail. That night when Hubs got home from work, I was filled with woe and wailed to him, "Well, we have a cat, but I have no idea where she is." He did some hunting around, found her hiding down a longish tunnel between boxes, reached in and gently dragged her on out, our little ebony chaos cat. A few months later, we would add another kitty to the mix, our squishy, chubby floof of an adorable, lovable, striped calico, and those would be our little cat girls for the next many years. Floof lived to be 15, and little Ebony lived many years after that. We had to have our little Ebony girl put down on Halloween. I don't know if that's fitting or just completely tragic. As standoffish as she was when I chose her for adoption, that little black cat became the most loving, snuggles-obsessed girl. She was so smart. I even managed to teach her a trick. I'd hold my hand out flat over her head and say, "Up!" and her eyes would get all nuts as she searched through her brain for a second, and then she'd stand up on her hind legs and bump her little head against my hand. She also liked to play fetch with her little kitty cat kooshball toy. She became totally senile in her last couple of years of life. I miss those little furry girls. In those early homeowner days, when Hubs was at work, I methodically worked my way through the house, soaking, peeling, and scraping wallpaper off, and slowly but surely regaining every pound I'd lost at the casino. I also applied for jobs. I got some interviews, but nothing panned out. I went for one interview for a receptionist at a processed meat place. In the foyer of their office building, they had a framed cartoon drawing on the wall of various farm animals sitting around a picnic table laid out with hams and other meats, forks and knives in hand. I thought that was fairly fucking creepy. Didn't get the meat job. Really glad I didn't get the meat job, to be honest. I also didn't get a job at a daycare nursery school. Finally, I got a job in the next city over. It was a data entry job for a company that updated book catalogs to digital for schools, libraries, and businesses. Remember those card catalogs you'd see at libraries? All those long, slim drawers with small manila tag cards with book titles, author, a small synopsis, other pertinent info, and their respective ISBN numbers? Or International Standard Book Numbers, if the acronym didn't grab you. And by the way, if you are thinking how incredibly fucking boring it is to even be talking about ISBNs, then you are on the right path to understanding how unbelievably, mind-numbingly boring that job was. Oh my God! Fun memory on ISBNs. When I was 6 and we had a rather scary school librarian, I can remember sitting there on the carpet as she was holding a copy of a Curious George book before us and was aggressively drilling us on how to identify, on the book, the necessary information to be able to find that book in the library. Scowling at us and jabbing a bony finger at the spine of the book to indicate the ISBN number and the abbreviation that stood for the author, stabbing the book with that gnarled finger and spitting out H.A. Ray at our wide-eyed little clueless selves. The job I was hired for involved having endless stacks of those little cards and entering certain info into the computer, over and over, all day, until you died. I was one of the older data entryers in there, and I remember looking around the computer-filled room one day and seeing a few fellow employees doing the big head nod as they desperately fought off boredom sleep. But hey, my more mature age and university grad skills clearly shone through, and so I was recognized for this, and not long thereafter rewarded by being forced to be the girl who did data entry and also answered the phone. I don't remember how long I worked there, but each morning I'd have to crawl along the highway with the rest of the rush hour traffic to work, listening to Duran Duran's Pop Trash album, and desperately trying to will people to go faster because I was always on the verge of being late. Other than the excruciating repetition and boredom, I have some hazy memories of cracking jokes with the kids who were my co-workers, feeling bitterly dissatisfied with my stupid, gritty weight loss shakes I was trying to call lunch, and inspiring everyone around me to realize this job actually sucked, and they should really start believing they deserve more in life. I left that job eventually for another dazzling job. This one was in the city I was living in, but probably took even longer to get to because it was at the opposite far side of town, and it felt like everyone headed east in the morning. It really didn't take long to absolutely hate the traffic in the big city. It took 3 times as long to get anywhere for work as it should have, simply because of monumental traffic congestion. Also, those were mean roads. If you were looking for a place, and your turn was suddenly coming up, but you were in the wrong lane, you were screwed. Good luck wishing for someone to let you in. Also, if you were behind the city bus, you were also royally screwed, as they stopped to pick people up 900 times, and you would be stuck behind them roiling in agony, because if you wanted to get in that other lane and go around the damn bus, you had to be very, very, very aggressive and basically risk your life. So anyway, my next job in suburban hell was at a little place that created and/or placed help wanted ads in the newspapers for businesses. That sounds like an improvement, you say. Not really. My job was to go through stacks of recent newspapers, find eye-catching help wanted ads, cut them out of the paper, calculate how much that ad would most likely have cost them to run, tape that ad onto a printed card that said something like, "You spent this much on this ad, but if you'd placed your ad with us, you would have saved this much money." Then I'd have to put those things in envelopes and mail them off to the company, but I also had to find out who was in charge of advertising or whatever it was for that company, if at all possible, and address that letter to them. We had a list of a lot of the people who were in charge at various prominent companies, but if I didn't know, I actually had to phone that company to find out. And guess what? People loved it when you called up to find out. No, they didn't. They'd hear your stupid, bright, and cheery voice and immediately turn leery and annoyed. Oh, and I soon got promoted to being the girl who also had to answer the phone. My bosses George and Gracie were okay. George was often annoyed with Gracie, and Gracie would sometimes say some off-the-wall things. Like the time it was a miserable cloudy day and she said to me that it was good that it was windy because the wind would blow all the clouds away. George wasn't always loved either. There was a client who once remarked about George, "I hate him to kill him." I was working at that job when 9/11 happened. We heard it come over the news on the radio in the office. There are no words to describe how shocking it was hearing what was happening, and the confusion after that first plane flew into the first tower. Nobody knew what was happening just yet. Was it a malfunction? Was it terrorism? Who was on that plane? As events unfolded, it just became more and more horrific. Eventually, it was agreed we should all close for the day. I remember putting the TV on when I got home and just standing watching the news coverage in absolute horror. People working downtown in Toronto were frightened. Nobody knew if anything awful would happen there as well. It was an absolutely terrible, terrible day. There is no way to truly describe how it felt as it happened. Remembering 9/11 almost as an aside is insulting. It just doesn't speak to the enormity of just how tragic it was. My heart goes out to everyone on that day. In the winter of 2002, Hubs and I celebrated our anniversary. 10 years. By this time, I had become a little weary of just being boyfriend and girlfriend. I wondered if we were ever going to move to the next step. That night, Hubs totally surprised me by proposing. We were going to do it. We were going to get married. We planned to get married that next September. We thought the end of the month would be nice because it would still be good weather after summer, we figured, and it would be cooler. We loved the thought of a nice, crisp wedding. I also turned the big 3-0 that year. It rained all day on that birthday. I think it was at the end of summer that I was let go from the classified ads place. Business had slowly declined over time, whether it was because there were larger, more efficient competitors, I don't know. But slowly, the small staff I'd worked with had been let go, one by one, until I was the last employee there. Without any real training, I suddenly had to create and place ads in the paper, drawing them up with their software. I have no idea how I flubbed my way through those ads, but somehow I never did anything disastrous. Despite watching employees get let go one by one, it was still a shock that day I got the sack. I was freaked. I had a wedding coming up that we had to help pay for, and a honeymoon in Puerto Vallarta that was already booked. What were we going to do? I signed up with a temp agency and soon after was told a cocoa plant was looking for a receptionist to work in their office. I put on some office pants and my lime green faux suede button-up shirt and headed off for my first day at my new job. This one was just about as far as the other one, but if you picture a map, just move the location over to the left side instead of the right side. Very small office. There was only me, 3 other women, and 1 man. Our little plant made cocoa powder for various companies that sold cookies, other baked goods, hot chocolate, etc. I would be in charge of answering the phone, again, receiving and creating the cocoa powder orders, receiving and distributing faxes, receiving shipments and courier deliveries from the courier guy who reeked so bad of cigarettes I had to conclude that A, he never cracked a window while he drove, B, he hotboxed himself in his delivery truck with a constant cig puffing away, and C, he didn't ever actually wash his uniform because he had achieved a level of sigginess that was truly majestic. This was a tough one, since he often enjoyed chit-chatting too long at my window. That job was okay. I actually didn't mind it too much. Mom even commented one time, "You must not mind this job too much. You don't complain about this one nearly as much as your other jobs." Ever the optimist. What was noteworthy about this job? Well, my boss encouraged me to leave the temp agency and become my own free agent, which allowed me to make more money. That was kind of fun. I had to create my own invoices, which must have been, technologically and professionally speaking, so completely rinky-dink it's not even funny. I was a great typist, but really kind of bullshitted my way through the world of computer formatting. Anywho. Another thing that was fun was one day someone came to my window selling books, and that's how I got my favorite cookbook ever. It was written by 2 Ukrainian ladies, and those recipes are pure homespun gold, reminiscent of my own Polish grandma's cooking. But the most exciting thing was the 10-pound block of chocolate. My boss sold various forms of chocolate. Chocolate, unfortunately, was not made at our location. One magical time, she had to take back a block of chocolate from a customer due to a dispute. It was perfectly fine, but she wasn't interested in it, and neither was the other lady I worked with. And I was all over that thing, let me tell you. Oh my God. It was so magical, I have to devote an entire blurb to it. The 10-pound block of chocolate. One day at work, I was minding my own business when my boss asked me if I would be interested in a 10-pound block of chocolate. Holy shit! Didn't she want it? Nope, she wasn't interested. I accepted the 10-pound block of chocolate. It was over an inch thick and about the size of a cookie sheet. It was like Christmas in block form. I gleefully took the 10-pound block of chocolate home. Hubs was also very excited by this. We kept it on a pan on our kitchen buffet cabinet, and we kept a sharp little knife beside it. Every time we came into the kitchen, we chiseled out a chunk of milk chocolate. When anyone would come over, we would dazzle them with the chocolate and even allow them to chisel out little chunks for their eating enjoyment. After a while, we started to get creative with the chocolate. We would melt chunks in a double boiler and add fun things to the chocolate like nuts or raisins or mint flavoring. The 10-pound block of chocolate seemed to last and last, like a great unending gift. But at last the sad day came when there was only a little bit of the magical block of chocolate left. Hubs fucking blew it. He melted most of what was left and then added mint liqueur. But he added the liqueur at the wrong stage, and the glossy melted chocolate seized and turned into dull, grainy chocolate dirt. There was much disappointment and much woe, and possibly a fair amount of sharp annoyance, due to being very addicted to chocolate by this point. The 10-pound block of chocolate now lives on only as a memory. Just as I was hired for that job, I had to tell them, yeah, I was getting married in less than a month, and I'd already booked my honeymoon, so I'd need time off for both. Luckily, they were really nice about that. We rolled forward with wedding prep. About a week before the wedding, things started to get pretty exciting. Hubs's relatives from Liverpool began arriving. Nearly all of his aunties and uncles, a couple of his cousins, and one cousin brought a girlfriend who was Scandinavian, as I recall. So she seemed extra cosmopolitan and glamorous somehow. Around a dozen relatives from Hubs's family from England arrived, as well as an uncle and an aunt from Australia. You should know that if you're ever going to have visitors from England, A, keep that kettle boiling, and B, make sure you have enough mugs. Most of the relatives were staying at my in-laws, so it was very exciting and probably fairly chaotic. Just imagine those full English breakfasts going down nearly every morning. Anywho, let it be known that I love a party. Mostly, I love throwing a party, because aside from long-term burnout, I can actually be pretty fun. So, mere days before our wedding, we had everyone over for a party. It was a Monday night, and our little townhome was soon packed and lively. I'd made a lot of food, and booze didn't cost a total arm and a leg yet in the early 2000s, so we were stocked up. God, that party was fun. Everyone was in high spirits, and Hub's family simply were just lovely, fun people. The energy began to pick up over the course of the evening, and just as things were getting really turned up, Hub's paternal uncle and aunt got coughed out of their plane from Australia and shuttled straight to our place. I can still picture the somewhat glazed, shell-shocked look on Hub's aunt's face. I can't imagine what it must have been like to have been on a plane for basically 2 days and finding yourself immediately dropped into a very lively party. It would either be really good or pretty bad. At any rate, after enough liquid courage, I started to belt out San Antonio Rose along with my Patsy Cline CD. One of Hub's aunts heard me, grabbed me, stopped the music, and made me sing it for everyone. Hub's family on his mother's side have always been very musical. If there's a party, someone is going to be playing an instrument, and everyone better come up with a song they like because they're going to be performing it. Do you know how freaking intimidating that was at first? I'm straight up going to say it. Most of us Canadians are fairly inhibited, but if you were at one of these family parties, you were going to sing. Like I said, I'd had enough to drink, and so I sang, and it blew Hubs' relatives away. I think it was after that singing began in earnest, with everyone. Loud singing, group singing, clapping and stomping the floor singing, and it was getting late. Maybe it was around 3 a.m. when we'd all had enough singing, and I put my Gypsy King's Greatest Hits CD on, and everyone just rounded up the evening dancing. It was the best party that had ever been or ever would be, and my parents missed it. In fact, my whole family missed it. Dad had some other event to go to with Mom, and after Mom found out about the epic fun and all the singing and dancing, she was basically slightly pissed at Dad forever for making them miss out. The next day, the haze of party magic had dispelled, and that's when we realized, oh shit, We just had the loudest party on a Monday night, and we're attached to our neighbors. I mean, we could hear whenever our neighbor was vacuuming, for crying out loud. So how must that party have sounded to them? There is no way they could have appreciated that. Hubs knocked on their door with a bottle of wine to apologize. Our poor neighbor was clearly pissed and grudgingly accepted the apology, but not the wine. It was pretty jerkish of us, but seriously, best party ever. The rest of the week is lost in a haze of last-minute details and putting together over 100 bonbonniere. Our wedding favor for each guest was a brandy glass with a little mesh pouch of chocolate almonds inside and a little tag saying thank you and the wedding date. So I was sitting at a table, starting to feel delirious from wedding details, with my mom and sister parceling up chocolates and writing and attaching the little cards. We got married on a Friday because it was cheaper but still sounded fun. The day started cloudy and sauna room level humid and warm. Funny, because Grandma had knitted me a fancy white fuzzy shawl for that day because she and Mom had feared it would be chilly. I wish! I wore a long, simple white dress with a draped bodice and spaghetti straps, no veil, white orchids in my hair. That day at my parents' house, my ladies and I got ready. Then they left, and then Mom and Brother left, and it was just Dad and I. Dad looked so handsome in his tuxedo. We drove off to the hotel together. I may sound biased here, but my wedding was super fun. Listen, like I said, I love a party, and the whole goal was maximum fun. Take notes. We got married in the poolside courtyard of a hotel in my hometown and had the reception in that same hotel. So if you were a guest, you could stay at that hotel, and all you had to do was take the elevator down to the ceremony, enjoy some cocktails by the pool while the wedding party went off and had pictures taken, and then just walk a few feet over to the room next door for the reception. Also, we did speeches while everyone ate. So it was all centered around simply having an amazing party, and it was good because we had a total kook of an eccentric DJ, but he knew how to play the crowd and keep that dance floor filled. It sucks at weddings when the DJ only plays what the young people want, or only the songs that the older generation like. Play the crowd. The ceremony was beautiful and basically the steamiest, sweatiest, oh my God, I'm dying, hottest ceremony ever. Yes, I'll take off a solid couple of points for that. I mean, it was hot outside anyway, and the indoor in-ground pool was heated. That room was tropical. Hubs looked very handsome in his tux, but since he was already the kind of guy who could wear a t-shirt even in January, he was melting in there. When it came time for him to put the ring on my finger, we both watched as he also left a giant drop of sweat with it, which he then thoughtfully swiped away with his thumb. We did it! We were married! It was time for us to leave and do photos while our guests had cocktails and snacks, but the DJ forgot to announce that there would be cocktails and snacks, and people started wandering around aimless and confused in the reception area for like a minute, which flipped Mom's lid. I was pretty burnt by this time and was surprisingly unbothered. That quickly got straightened up and we headed off for pictures. Mom and Dad had been bickering and sniping at each other, thanks to wedding stress, and also because they were Mom and Dad, all morning, and after pictures, Brother let them have it. He told them to cool it. It's Karen's wedding day. Magically, they stopped fighting after that. Mom also was super bent that we had not organized any order for speeches. I was beyond caring by that point, as I said, and was perfectly comfortable to wing it. Nothing doing. Mom got us in a team huddle and assigned a speeches order. It all went well. We had a beautiful traditional fruit cake made and decorated by one of Hubs's aunts. She'd made the layers of the cake well ahead of time in England so as to give them time to mature. Then she'd packaged them up with great care to send them safely on the plane when they were coming to Canada. The gentleman at the airport in England had serious concern and reverence for these cakes, and assured them that he would indeed make sure they were treated with the utmost care. When the aunties arrived in Toronto, they made their way to the part of the airport where you find your fragile, delicate baggage. Where were the cakes? According to them, they waited a moment, a loud alarm blared out, and then the cake boxes thunked out of a large pipe from the ceiling about 4 feet to the floor. "Oh, for God's sake!" one of the aunties exclaimed loudly in robust disgust. One of the cakes got cracked. Luckily, nobody noticed when it was decorated. Our wedding was rocking. The dance floor was packed most of the night. I feel like I barely saw my mother. Mom was still able to have some drinks back then, and she spent most of the evening in the smoking section with her own siblings. Every time I looked around, where the hell is Mom? I spent a lot of slow dances sitting alone at our wedding party table. That was kind of odd as I look back on it. Hub's brother approached the DJ before the last dance and asked if he could play "You'll Never Walk Alone" by Jerry and the Pacemakers at the very end. The DJ expressed his worry that if he played any songs after 1 a.m., he could get fired. "You're playing it," he was told under no uncertain circumstances. And so, we ended the night arm in arm in a great circle singing that song with much emotion. The wedding had been a great, fun, amazing success. They'd forgotten to bring out the midnight cakes and sweets, which flipped Mom's lid when she realized the next day. But like I said, she'd been too busy partying it up in the smoking area most of the night. Near the end of the evening, Hubs and I had reached an impressive level of pure exhaustion. We were wiped. That wasn't the case for everyone, though, because we found out after that some friends of my in-laws had turned their room into party central, and most of them who were staying in the hotel continued to party it up very, very late after that. The next day, we were back at our little house in suburban hell, and I was pretty shot, so I spent a good portion of the day opening our wedding presents and crying like only the truly exhausted and overly sentimental can cry, as I read the nice messages on the cards. Good times. Nothing like leaving for steamy Mexico when it's already hot outside. It was a bit sad to leave when all of Hub's relatives were still there in full vacation mode. When we stepped off the plane in Jalisco, as Hub said, it was like breathing through a wet blanket. We had a pleasant, bakingly hot honeymoon, and Hubs returned home with the worst ear infection of his life brewing. In 2003, I went on the best vacation of my life, experienced some of the worst physical pain of my entire life, and found out I was pregnant. I turned 31 in the Dominican Republic on the last day of our vacation. Hubs and I had gone with my parents, my siblings, and their significant others, and we had the best, most magical time. I had to book the whole damn vacation, and for everyone, because forever I've been assigned the role of secretary in my family. Dad had given me his credit card number because he was going to be paying for most of our trip and said, "Shorty, here's my credit card. Get us those flights, baby." Ugh, so stressful booking everyone's trip. Someday I'll be the person who sits back and lets someone else work through the details. That trip is one of my happiest memories ever. But then, not long after, there was gallbladder. If you've ever had a gallbladder attack, you know that it can be almost beyond description on the pain scale. I didn't know what was happening to me the first time I'd had an attack. It started as an ache in my upper abdomen, which progressed to a monstrous, searing, burning, scorching, radiating pain that wrapped its way around to my back and lasted for a good hour of me being rendered useless, hunched over and rocking in agony. One time it happened after eating too much cheese while a Tom Cruise movie was on TV. This was the worst one yet. It was probably stupid trying to wait it out, but who the fuck wants to go to the hospital if they can avoid it? By the time it passed and the pain had finally subsided, I had fallen asleep on the cool floor of our downstairs bathroom, with my head on the phone book opened up to the number of the ambulance. So I went to the specialist and had the test done. Gallstones. And apparently they were the smaller, plentiful ones, which according to the doctor was worse. If it had just been one big stone, they could have perhaps zapped it out of there, but Doc said that this meant my body liked making gallstones, so he strongly recommended getting that gallbladder yanked out. After a few spectacular attacks, I was all for it. Mom was relieved. She didn't want me to go through that again, and back then, gallbladders were getting yanked out without much thought. No talk of saving any organs or anything, and then apparently I'd be able to eat anything I liked without worry. Poor gallbladder. Nobody valued you. Sniff. After the doctor had given me the news about the gallstones, I had an inkling that had been niggling away at me, so I asked him, "What if I thought I might be pregnant?" "Well, in that case," he told me, "I would have to wait to get my gallbladder removed and try to be very, very careful with what I ate for the next many months." I left that medical building, crossed the busy intersection to the mall where I had parked my car, and walked into the nearest department store and bought a home pregnancy test. It was no big surprise, really, when it came back positive. I was going to be a mom. Hubs and I were going to be parents. Somehow, I did not have any major gallbladder attacks while I was pregnant, which was nothing short of a miracle since I was not careful and was coaxing Hubs to get us fish and chips a lot. Holy fuck, I ate a lot of fish and chips. Wednesday, October 20th, 2004. A letter for my son. Dearest son, you are small. You are 8 months old and you won't remember this. And one day when you are taller than I won't remember this. I had to write this letter to try to capture how I love you so very much. At this time my arms are still strong, my eyes are still good, and I still look young. You are a little boy who loves to stand up, not sit. You are just starting to really laugh if you find something funny enough. You can pick up bits of food with your finger and thumb if you try really hard. You scream with delight at the kitties, and if you choose to hug us, you say, "Aw." When I burp, you never fail to look at me with huge, incredulous eyes, and you laugh at my stupid songs and faces. Later, that night you were born, I stood by the hospital window beside my bed and looked out at the world. You were in the neonatal intensive care unit. The whole world looked different when we drove home, and I was amazed and terrified. I loved feeding you as you got older because it is the only time you let me snuggle you. I love your fuzzy little pumpkin head. When I say, "Are you dancing?" sometimes you even dance.